Hi and good morning from the UK. Stock markets have just opened in the last 15-20 minutes and we've caught the magician at it once again. And I want to bring it to your attention that you need to, if you want to see how the magician does the trick, how, the FTSE 100 maintains, its points, to keep it inflated the way it is. You've got to look at the week chart, not the day chart, because you won't see it. And I'll just show you what we're talking about. We're talking about, this little trick here that the magician seems to be doing, but we've clocked it now. We've seen the sleight of hand. We've saw the little bit of clear string holding the coin in the palm of the hand, and when he, closes his hand, it disappears up his sleeve. This is it here. And I estimate it costs about 100 million to pull this little stunt off. And if we just go to today's market as it opened, lo and behold, here's the little trick again, where nearly 100 billion pound has had to be injected into the market to keep the stocks afloat. Now, before we go any further, I want to show you what happens if you look at any other chart. So if we look at the month, you can't see it, can you? Right? If you look at the year, you can't see where they're doing it. You have to look at the week chart in order to see the injection of the 100 million or thereabouts that goes into the market artificially. Nobody's buying these shares other than the companies themselves. Or, I have just pondered that the government might be using taxpayers' money to fund these companies and keep the stocks artificially inflated. What this is like trying to blow up a balloon with a hole in it. It's going to go down. And I'm going to show you a story about some of the comments that's coming out from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and Christine Lagarde telling other sovereign nations, such as China, that you need to do what we're doing in order to shore up the markets, your end. What she said was that there was a communications problem. I don't think there's a communications problem. I think what's happening over in that sovereign country is them taking care of their own affairs. And I believe it was a couple of weeks ago where they took off the protection system, which is what we haven't done, and they're just letting the markets roll the way they should do, which is all to do with their new anti-corruption procedures over there. So, what's causing all this? Well, if you're following, you'll probably already know. Right now, there's an oil war taking place, and we've got oil, what we call them? These people that wear bombs around the vest. Not terrorists, suicidal oil companies, let's call them that. And what do I mean by that? Well, over in Saudi Arabia right now, there's a war going on, and they're part of OPEC. You've got Gazprom stopping pipelines flowing through Syria, and of course that's why there's a problem in Syria right now. And you've got Saudi Arabia in a price war with Iran, and Saudi Arabia have brought this price war on because if we go back about 24 months ago, when oil companies was investing heavily into fracking because the price of oil was so high, it was now viable for fracking to be introduced as a way of getting energy out the ground, because if it's crude or gas, it's all the same. It keeps turbines going and generators running. But it was cheaper at that point 24 months ago for people to get into fracking. So what happened is they started having loans off of banks to buy the rigs and the land and set up the licensing for all this, and fracking was viable, but that was only because of the price of oil was high, right? Saudi Arabia looked at this and said, look, this is not good for our business. We'll drop the price of oil and we'll put those fracking companies out of business, and at this, even at the sacrifice of lowering the price of oil. So that's what happened. And obviously there's been a bit of recent tension, I believe, with Saudi Arabia and Iran, and now they're both in a price war. This might have something to do with Barack Obama's deal although it may not have been highlighted in that deal that this was going to be the case. So what was Iran's, so Saudi Arabia starts dropping the price of their oil. What was Iran's response to this? We'll increase the production by 1 million gallons, I think it was, or 1 million barrels a day, and we'll roll with your price fixing. And Saudi Arabia have said, okay, we don't mind if we run the crude oil pumps at $4 a barrel. So this has caused turmoil in the global markets. And there is another side to this as well, guys, and it's not just the oil wars that's been happening. There has been an economic slowdown, and we see this happening quite regularly over a 7 or 8 year period. If you go back in time, you have these cycles, and this is what all of your chief economists are talking about, these cycles, and we should be in a downturn at the moment. Well, we're not in a downturn, and that is because of the magicians coming in, or the protection racketeers coming in and injecting more money into the markets to keep the market price at around about, with the FTSE 100 index, let's say, around about, hovering around the 6,000. They're trying to stem the air going out the balloon by throwing in another £100 million. If you know you're going to lose money, what do? You cut off that point. You draw a line and say, look, if it drops below this, I'm out the game. I'm taking something rather than losing the lot. But this isn't what's happening. I'm not sure whether Christine Lagarde is asking nations to use taxpayers' money to fund this leaking balloon, or she's asking the companies themselves to buy back the shares in order to keep the prices up. But what will eventually happen is they will run out of money, these companies, and they won't be able to prop it up, and at a later date they're going to lose. And they're going to lose twice as much because they're creating a false market. Now, I just want to point out, this is where they're doing it, right? And I also want to now supply the proof where they say so themselves that they're doing it. So let's get on to that. So, proof of this, this manipulation of the stocks is right here in this article. In fact, the magician's trick has been given a name, and the name of the magician's trick that we're all talking about right now is this word here, and you can look it up. In fact, I'll do it for you. It's called a rally. That's what they do. It's a rally, when they hype up the markets artificially to encourage growth or stabilization. But before we go and have a look at what the true definition of a rally is, where people buy their own stocks to keep the thingy going, let's just have a look at what Christine Lagarde is talking about with regards to China's got a communication problem. Who are the IMF to tell China what to do with its own stock market, let alone anybody else's? In fact, it's this interference from third parties such as the IMF, which is not really represented by one country but many, that is causing probably the majority of the problems. If they just left it to a free market and stopped interfering like they are doing, falsely inflating the balloon that they all know has got a hole in, and whatever inflation they put into that balloon, it's only going to pop. And the evidence of this is the dry bulk index. There's no trade. I was speaking to someone today, and they said you can't connect the stock markets with the dry bulk index, and I believe you can. And the reason why you can is because it is manufacturers that are, in the first place, filling the containers up that are being put on ships to be exported internationally. And these companies that are loading the stuffs onto containers are also at the same time floating their stocks on the market. And we find that the top 100 companies are the companies that we're talking about. So if they're buying their own shares and they're artificially keeping the price of stocks up through these quote rallies, then they're trying to convince people that the prosperity of, say, the United Kingdom is much better than what it actually is. And that's what the stocks are supposed to represent, the prosperity of a country. Yet if the country's top 100 companies are buying their own shares, then they're manipulating the market. And it should be a criminal offence to do so. This is supposed to be a free market, and it's obviously not. When companies can keep artificially inflating their own stocks and shares on the market. And, here's Christine Lagarde telling everybody, that that's what they should be doing with their own currency. But the problem is with China, and what this woman doesn't realise, is that China are the manufacturing powerhouse of the globe. And the reason why their stocks are falling is because nobody's buying. And if no one's buying, then there's certainly no containers going on ships being transported around the world. And if you want an indication as to how well the stock market's going, this is what I said in the last video, you don't want to be looking at the stocks market, you want to be looking at the dry bulk index, because that tells you whether there's trade, international trade. Now, if a country's prosperity is increasing, then it's naturally that it will be exporting. And that isn't the case with the majority of the countries around the world, including the powerhouse of the world, China. And that's why its stocks are collapsing. And if you read in this article, they've initiated an anti-corruption program. I believe they took off, the emergency stops a couple of weeks ago, and they've let the markets run as they should, because I think what they've realised is they're just denying the inevitable. In other words, they're looking at Christina Lagarde and all the other European countries in the West, just try and blow up a balloon with a hole in it. Inevitably, the air's going to leak out, and they're going to do such things as these rallies, which, as this article states itself, it was short-lived. An hour after opening, the FTSE 100 had slid 0.2% lower, marking the start of another volatile day. And when we look at the stock markets, they've had another go at blowing the balloon up, with, the magician and his rally, and very likely the same will happen. But each time I've reckoned it's costing these companies around 100 million every time they do, a puff of air into this balloon to keep the stock markets afloat, and it just doesn't seem to be achieving what they are setting out to achieve, and that is stabilisation of the markets. Well, if we look at the dry bulk index, and we might as well pull that up now, we'll see that it's not stabilising. So as you can see, it's not stabilising. It's dropped in the matter of a few days again to 355 points. Guys, the last crash that they told us about that happened in 2007 and affected the markets in 2008 more noticeably than anything, hasn't recovered. And the evidence of that is the Baltic Dry Index. Right now, the points stand at 355, and they're dropping by the week. You can follow it yourselves, guys. This is the real indication of how well an economy is doing and how long there is before a collapse, and that's why I said 3 months. At some point in March, mid-April, according to a bit of math I did, that will bottom out, and at that point there'll be no international shipping at all taking place. Think about it. If there's no ships going into ports, there's no freight trains running, there's no freight moving on the motorways of countries, inevitably it is going to affect you at the point that when you go to buy, even the staples and necessities to keep yourselves going. This is grinding to a halt, and we're never going to see the picture if we're following the stock markets, because the stock markets, as you have just been proven to, are being manipulated and not showing an accurate account for the current situation. And this is dangerous. 7 billion people on this world that are being hoodwinked by, those that control the markets of the world. And then, although it is coming out slowly about the Baltic Dry Index, very few know about it. So, we've seen the sleight of hand. We know that the sleight of hand trick by the magician or the market manipulators have a certain word for this trick. It's called the rally trick, and the definition of the rally trick is explained here. A period of sustained increases in the prices of stocks, bonds, or indexes. This type of price movement can happen during either a bull or a bear market, when it is known as either a bull market rally or a bear market rally, respectively. However, a rally will generally follow a period of flat or declining prices. And breaking down the rally, a rally is caused by a large amount of money entering the market, building up the prices. The length of the magnitude of a rally depends on the depth of buyers, along with the amount of selling pressure they face. For example, if there is a large pool of buyers but few investors willing to sell, there is likely to be a rally. If, however, the same large pool of buyers is matched by a similar amount of sellers, the rally is likely to be short and the price movements minimal. And that is exactly what we see when we look back at what has happened this week on the markets, and with regards to what Christina Lagarde from the IMF was talking about. Let's have a look at it. So, here's the magician's trick. This slight rise that happened on Tuesday. It probably cost in the regions of £100 million to do. So it's an expensive trick. We know what the trick's called. It's called a rally, and we know it was a short because here were the buyers, which was the rally trick, yeah, and here were the sellers, and we know it's a short because it didn't last long. So the suckers tried it again today on Friday, and it seems like it's held a little bit. But you can only see this trick demonstrated when you look at the week chart. Like I said earlier, if you look at the month chart, it's hard to spot where the rallies are. If you look at the year chart, it's even harder. And the 5 years, it gets even harder. But on the week chart, we can see the rallies happening as they do, when they do. And that is because as soon as the stock market opens from the day it closed, we see the rally trick, the magician's trick. And this is stock market manipulation. This is the prosperity of a country being manipulated by a load of crooks, in short. Pardon the pun, but that is exactly what we're seeing. And it's dangerous, guys. It's really dangerous, the game they're playing. Because at this end of the spectrum, the stock market looks like it's doing well. And that there is stability in a country because the stock markets are stable. But the reality is, when we look at the dry bulk index, and we see that it has not recovered from 2008, where it was at 9,600 points, to the present day where it is now at 355 points. It has dramatically took a tumble. It is tanked out, and it is almost about to happen. I put it about 3 months out when international shipping ceases completely, and it is at that point where you need to be prepared, and this is what people have been saying, and I have put it real clear here for you guys to see it. And I think I've done a better job than the experts that talk about this regularly, because they haven't put it in the same manner as where I've put it, so that you understand how they're manipulating the markets, how dangerous it is to manipulate the prosperity of a country when you know the truth to be the opposite. What we're seeing here, right, is the stock markets telling a big whopper, when the reality is the dry bulk index tells us the truth. Global shipping seizing up as we speak right now, and has been doing so since the last crash. If people are waiting, and this is the big thing here, guys, if people are waiting for a stock market to crash whilst manipulations and rally tricks are happening, it's never going to crash, is it? Only the rug's going to be pulled from under everybody's feet in about 3 months' time when they realise that the dry bulk index has actually crashed. Right? And there's no international shipping, and that means there's no cargo, there's no grains, there's no fuel being shipped around this world. It's 3 months or so away from happening, and the stock markets do not show any indication of that. I'm thinking right now, guys, that our governments are propping up the markets with taxpayers' money, and that's why they keep able to keep doing this, right? Because the money's got to come from somewhere. If the rally trick costs around 100 million a time, then where are the companies getting the money from to do these tricks? Where's it coming from? The reality is, trillions of pounds have been wiped off the prosperity of Western countries, and we're trying to keep face by manipulating the stocks. Is it the taxpayers that are paying for it? I think so. I think that's who's paying for the money trick, or the rally trick as we now know it. And they don't even hide it. It's in plain sight, guys. You know, I'll leave you to think about this. There's a link down there if you want to support some of the work we do on this channel. You know, I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.